Welcome to my channel, Comic Book Noise, as we talk about my comic book company, Digital Noixe, as we explain the characters and the storylines of the Digital Noixe universe. So today I wanted to talk about a subject I've been thinking about all this week. I really didn't have any strong issues to talk about. I mean, there are issues, but they're not comic book based or based about my company, just things about politics and things that are going on. And somehow that will connect if I come up with the concept of content that could connect those political things towards my comic book, and I easily could. But I wanted to talk about something that was at the forefront of my mind that maybe I touched upon it in other videos, but I never explained in its entirety of how I was inspired to create Digital Noixe Studios or Digital Noixe Entertainment. I feel very deeply, of course, about my empire that I'm building. And you know, I just wanted to do a little video about it and give you context of who I am, where I come from, you know, just a little summary of who I am and where I come from and how I was inspired to become a comic book creator and a comic book publisher. Okay, so this will be interesting. Let me put this over here. I got the little microphone. I don't know if you can hear me or not. But yeah, so it all started when I was a little kid, and as young as I could remember, I remember the time where I was hit to be an artist, and I grew love of being an illustrator. And I think I was about maybe 3 or 4 or around that age. So I think it was such a pivotal moment of time because I clearly remember witnessing my mother doing an illustration of a person. And I was very impressed by it as young as that kid that I was. And it kind of impacted my life and inspired me to a point to where I was inspired by art at a young age, around about 3 or 4. And so when I witnessed that, my mother was very creative and artistic, by the way, as you can get a hint of that. But I was very inspired by, I remember the illustration like it's in front of me right now as I'm speaking to you. And I was so impressed and so was like interested in what my mom did as an artist and seeing something created from her hand like it was a person. I started doodling myself and I was pretty good at it. So I guess I got the gene and was very inspired by my mom to being an artist, because my dad was more like a business type of person, or more like he was just like a person on the go, just doing his job that wasn't artistic at all and things like that. My mom was on the artistic side, so of course she took care of me, so I saw that side of her. And so I started drawing on walls and got in trouble with that, of course, and just started illustrating on paper. And my brother actually knew how to draw when I was little, but he used to draw things that scared me as a little kid. My brother was like 10 years older than I was, so he was at that age. And so I was very inspired by art and being an illustrator. So I started drawing like images, and it became coherent that my figures became coherent, that it was like, okay, this is a figure. He knows how to draw at this early stage, the anatomy somewhat of a body that anybody would recognize. And so I just carried that on and started illustrating. And then the first time I ever witnessed a comic book, I think I was 5 years old, and I saw my first comic book, and I think my brother had issues of comic books in his closet. And I think one day I stumbled upon it and was looking through it, and I was like amazed. I was like, wow, what is this other world I'm looking at? Like, I didn't see it as an illustration or anything at that time. I think I was around 5 years old, maybe a little younger. And I was so impressed by it. And it was kind of scary to me because it was like another world that I was looking into, and it was like another dimension when I look into the comics, because the images were so real, and you felt the passion and humanity of the characters somehow. The storytelling, I have a sense of what storytelling was when I was looking at the pictures and everything. And so I was very impressed by comic books, and I was already doing art as a little kid. And so I was kind of inspired by that, but it wasn't like a stronghold for me to do. And of course, as any other kid, I used to look at cartoons and Sesame Street, and I used to like those and was inspired by those things and things like that. But I think that the point where comic books really had a strong hold on me was when the time I went with my dad to work, because he had to watch over me and take care of me because my mom was off working and doing other things and stuff like that. So he had to take care of me that day. So I had to go to work with my dad. And so while doing that, we stopped by a local store. It was something sort of similar to a 7-Eleven, but it wasn't. But it was like a corner store that was down the street from where he worked. But he had to stop by there to get whatever it was. I don't know. I was little. And I think I was at the age of like 9 years old or 10. So around that age. And when I saw, I was looking and I was bored, and my dad was doing some shopping or whatever. And I asked my dad, can I look around or whatever? He said, stay close. And I turned around, I saw this comic book rack. I don't know if you remember the time, or if you're old enough at the time to remember when comic books were in comic book stands in like the local drugstore or 7-Eleven or something like that. And it had like these different comic book racks of different titles. And so I went over there. I was like, I have nothing else to do. And I think, sort of when I first was introduced to comic books, I was kind of drawn to it anyway from my brother's collection that I stumbled upon when I was 3. So it kind of, elevated me to go over there to view the comics at the comic book rack. So I looked into it. And so the first books I ever picked up and ever purchased as a comic book was the X-Men 121, and read Sonya, I forget what issue that was. And I was so impressed when I looked into those books. I think I mentioned that instance in prior videos, but the X-Men really turned my head around, because I just saw people of different nationalities, different cultures, different languages. And I was pretty good at reading, so I understood the words, and words I didn't understand, I looked them up and found out what they meant. And I was so impacted and empowered by these comic books just by reading them. Of course, it was the first thing I purchased, and I was hooked from then on. And so needless to say, from then on, I was addicted and obsessed with comic books. And what I was addicted and obsessed by comic books was the artistry, the story, the art of the whole thing. But I myself just thought, wow, I want to be a comic book artist. This is what I want to be. And so I pursued that. I created comic books out of notebook paper. I created stories and started creating ideas. I copied. John Byrne was my ultimate all-time favorite artist, because he was the one that really impacted me as an artist in comic book form and in art itself. And so I really just obsessed and just passionately went after being a comic book artist. I used to send samples to Marvel when I was like 13, just sending samples all the time. And I got good feedback a lot of times and everything and stuff like that. And that was all my passion was. But in the meantime, just in art in general, this is all I wanted to do. And so I went to comic book stores and everything and stuff like that. And I became a really good artist. And I won some awards in high school as an artist and things like that. But back in my mind, I wanted to be a comic book artist. I didn't want to be anything else. And when I got older, around the age of 16, my dad sat me down and he didn't really want me to be an artist because he knew that it wasn't a field to where you could make money, or as he thought, he wanted me to be a chef or a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. And that was something I just was not interested in. But so he sat me down. He's like, okay, you got to go to college or something like that because you're turning a certain age. What does he want to do? And I said, Dad, I wanted to be an artist. And I want to go to art school. That was an interesting conversation we had with my dad. My dad knew I was a good artist, but he thought something better for me. But I wanted to be a comic book artist. And so we went back and forth. Meanwhile, I had got an odd job when I graduated high school at a printer, at a local printer. And I became sort of like an artist there. And then at a comic book shop, I knew the owner of the comic book shop, and he knew of this comic book publisher called AC Comics that did Film Force and other comic books. And he saw my work, and the comic book owner was impressed. So he introduced me to, I think his name is Bill Black back in the day. He's from Florida. And he saw my work and was very impressed. And he said, wow, you wanted me to do some issues or samples of work. And I did. And so I did a couple of issues of Film Force and created this new character from, I guess her name back then was Miss Victory, and I designed the new character called Rad. So that went on, but then that fell by the way. But because I was still pursuing art and pursuing Marvel, and because I was looking for the big leagues to draw, not a little league to draw, which was AC Comics in my mind during that time. So. Then I went to school. I kind of stopped that. Then I went to school. I went to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale. I excelled in that. I became best in class from that school when I graduated. And I got out of school and I was like, what can I do? And I started to draw, work in the art department at the biggest newspaper circuit called the Jacksonville Journal, I think it was back then. And it was my first job, professional job as an artist. And so I was an art for them, but then it became a scandal because I came in on affirmative action. That's what was told to me by my then boss. But he told me it was like a limited situation. I was new, young and naive, and he was racist. And so what he did was set up to the employment agency that I wanted to stay limited for 6 months at this particular job, instead of saying like, oh, this is, you can have this job forever. And so it was a mix up, and then it was found out. And so my coworker told on him and it got him fired and all this other stuff. And so it was a whole racist thing. It was Jacksonville, Florida back then. And racism was really high, and I had a racist boss, and I was so oblivious to things, so I was just like in my own world. and other people saw the racism and took care of it themselves for me. But yeah, that was an instance of racism that I experienced on my first professional job as an artist. And then so I said, you know what, I wanted to move on. And then I went to New York, and my first job in New York was to be a graphic artist at Tommy Hilfiger. But at the same time, I was still trying to break into Marvel in DC, and I got a job there at Tommy Hilfiger. I moved, I found a place to live and all that other stuff. And then I finally got my big break at Marvel. And I think it was Marvel Team Up, and it was, I forget what issue, but it was working with Scott Lobdell, who was a prolific writer during that time. And it was dealing with a small story. If you know how Marvel Team Up was, or not Marvel Team, yeah, I think it was Marvel Team Up. And it had little segments of stories of different characters. But I had like maybe 8 pages to do. And that was my first break-in at Marvel. And I drew the issues there, and it was really cool. And then the next project, I think I did, it was so many, I did little odds and end jobs at Marvel. And then I did little odds and end jobs at other comic book companies. I did some work for Milestone. I did some work for Valiant Comics. I did some work for, I think, Dark Horse. Little odds and ends. I don't think I did anything strictly outrightly for DC Comics. But, I worked with Marvel and DC. But my problem was I couldn't really follow script. Always had a whole nother originating idea in my mind of storytelling. I was pretty good at storytelling, but reading a script, I always wouldn't follow direct directions, because I said, I can tell it a better way with the art and things like that. And I always had stories in my mind of my own characters and how I thought the story should go and things like that. And so I really didn't know I was actually a storyteller. That's why I fell in love with comics, not just with art itself. If I wanted to just be an artist, I could just be a painter or something like that. But I was more like, what I loved about comic books was that you can create your own world, your own universe within, comic books. So as years grew on, I worked with Marvel here and there, and I freelanced with Marvel or freelanced in comic books and worked in the fashion industry, which I was working in. And that was my main steady job of income. And then it was sort of like I came to a point to where I was saying, you know what, I really have to sit down and really be honest with myself. And I think September the 11th happened, and that's when everything woke me up and said, hey, Robert, you have to do your own comic book company. This is something that you want to do. You have your own stories to tell. You have your own ideas you want to express. You have a story within you, and you want to do your own thing. You can't just sit back and just want to be an artist. You want to be a creator. You want to tell your own stories. You want to get your stories out, how you see what a superhero is. Stop trying to vie to be an X-Men artist. You can be your own artist, creating your own stories. And so, and this is how Digital Noixe came to be. And of course, my first look into creating a title was this character called Delete. And Delete was something I had in the back of my mind and something that I wanted to tell. And it was something I wanted to do. And I had this character in my mind somewhat. And I was like, should I do it? It was kind of like a shaky thing for me to do because I never seen this type of character in a major comic book on a carrying her own title, her own regular title. First of all, she was female, and second of all, she was African American. So it's like two things that were rarely a big thing in the comic book genre because it's mostly a male dominated genre, especially it was a male white dominated genre. And so I was just like, I don't know if I should do it or not. And then I was like, you know what? Let me just do it. I started creating and started doing it. I started creating her. Delete, as you see in prior videos, you know who Delete is. I'll do future videos about her, but the thing about her is she's a cyber witch, and she has a power of magic and technology abilities, and they all coincide with each other. And it's a unique kind of magic, and it's called Magitech. And so this is just a different kind of magic that's never been in existence within the universal reality. And this character embodies it and is the first carrier of this particular magic to have. So, I could go more into depth with her about that. And so it was kind of a stir. I got a few interviews with it. I was in Comic Book Shop News about it. I was in King Magazine about it during that time. I was mentioned in, there's a periodical, I think it was called AP News. I think it was called AP News. It was a New York-based newspaper periodical that comes out in New York, like, I think daily. And it was free and stuff like that. So, because it was the first of its kind, that it was very rare. Yeah, I know you had Marvel had Storm and DC had Vixen, but this was the first kind of character that was African American that led in her own regular series during that time. And that was in 2004. I think I came up with that comic book. And then also another milestone I created, something that I felt dearly about. And I just did a video, if you see, I guess this past week, if you see that I just did content on, and it's called The Positive O+MEN. And The Positive O+MEN is a superhero team where all the members are HIV and AIDS positive. And so I'm very much of an HIV and AIDS activist, and how to prevent HIV and AIDS from spreading. I'm negative, by the way, just to let you know, but I'm very passionate about the HIV and AIDS awareness and how not to spread it, and to educate people on the virus, as well as myself as I explore that theme for the comic book. And, so I created that book that caused a lot of stir. That brought me to a higher level of news. That news of me creating this comic, because it was the first of its kind, came almost like on an international scale, because I've been interviewed by news articles in Ireland. I was on the news, I think, in India about it. I was in a popular periodical here called, AM New York. It's not a magazine, but a newspaper periodical that comes out freely daily or weekly, one of the two. And I was on NPR News. On interview, I was interviewed by NPR about my comic book, The Positive O+MEN. And it was interesting because I guess I was ahead of my time doing that, because I talked about different sexualities with these characters. And this book, I think, came out in 2006. And so I was kind of ahead of my time about talking about sexuality and acceptance, that showed and expressed itself through comic books and comic book characters. So, and I did a video prior to that of what the Positive O+MEN were about, and so you can view that. But, and so now today I am going to reprise all those two titles along with two other titles. One is called The Sound System, because I feel passionately about music. And if you look at the video prior, you can see that I created this comic book title that should be coming out in 2004. I'm working hard on it as we speak right now. It's about music. And each and it's a superhero team, a superhero band that's banded together, a superhero team that's banded together. That's probably a cool saying. And each character or each member represents a music genre. And I delve into music, politics, all that stuff, social issues within this comic book, because it's about just what's happening today and because music is expressive to me of the times. And so that's what my comic book will explore about music and how important music is and all that stuff. So as you can tell, with anything that I do or anything I create with a comic book, I have to feel passionately about what I'm creating. I can't just create good versus bad and superheroes just beating up the villain type of thing just for the sake of it. I have to have some kind of meaning behind it to feel passionate about it, to create a comic book title or create a story. So so whatever title I come out with, it's a passionate story. It's not just because I wanted to do a kick butt type of superhero or anything like that, or just to be cool or just to be whatever. So every character that I create has a meaning and a purpose behind it. So, but Digital Noixe, I named the company Digital Noixe because digital to me, it means up to date, modern, new, advanced, the future, technology, or what's happening now. That's what digital means. And noise means I want you to hear me, shout it out, listen. When you hear my noise, you listen to it, you acknowledge it. So that's the meaning behind Digital Noixe and what my comic book universe is about. So, I just wanted to explain, I just did a video just to explain what was my inspiration, why did I create Digital Noixe Studios or Digital Noixe Comics or Digital Noixe Entertainment. And so I hope you see a little about what it is about and you can understand where I come from being a creator. All right, but that's all I have. So like and subscribe if you want to see more content on my comic book company, Digital Noixe. Be careful out there, stay safe, and take care.